All right, well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Glad you're here. So glad you're here in person. If you're still watching online, thanks for tuning in online. This is the service that will be on the website from now until eternity. So let's get this right? Hey, it's great to see some red out there. Valentine's Day is today, so happy Valentine's Day. Guys, you still have time to order some flowers right now. Ladies, you can stop by the store, Dollar General, get some massage oil on your way home. Whatever your Valentine would like today. Thanks for being here. We started a new series today, and I want you to join in it with me. I really enjoyed the last series, Psalm 73, 5-point turn, but we're shifting today. We're going to talk about some good news. Good news. Don't you want some good news? Everybody likes good news. You don't have to look far for bad news. I mean, bad news will catch you, won't it? I mean, it'll sneak up on you. It'll hit you in the face. You can turn on the TV today. You can look through your stories. You can look through your news blogs or your news apps and find lots of bad news. People killing each other, killing themselves. Lots of hatred and anger. And even in the church, there's animosity. Not just this church. I'm talking about the church in America, the church in the world. Incivility, trash talking to each other on social media. It's amazing what social media will do for your courage, isn't it? I mean, you're willing to say anything and do anything. And it's sad. It's sad what we in America, we in the world have allowed this virus to do to us in dividing us in so many ways. There's so much bad news out there. I mean, I don't even have time to start. How many of you like some good news? So we're going to talk about some good news. Yeah, good news. And it's not just good news. This word good news is a definition for another Bible word. How many of you know what that word is? The word gospel is right. The word gospel can be defined, because really that's what the word means, good news. And that Greek word can be translated out with two words, good news. And so we're going to talk about not just the good news, but how the good news can change our lives. So this story, don't mistake this, wherever we go with this over the next 3 weeks, 4 counting today, don't mistake the fact that the good news is about one thing. It is about the incredible, amazing, historically proven, sinless life, sacrificial death, and life-changing resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. That's what the good news is about. And the Apostle Paul said in Romans chapter 1, verse 16, he said, I'm not ashamed of this story. Not ashamed of it. Now, I want to tell you something, and leave that verse up there. I want to tell you something. If you go out here and you start talking about the sinless life and the sacrificial death and the life-changing resurrection of Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, the one and only, then there's going to be a lot of people who will try to shame you. They will try to shame you. They will try to call you names. They will try to marginalize you, push you off to the side, ostracize, in other words, criticize you. But Paul said, I am not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. So we're going to talk about not just the story of Jesus, because it's good news if it's the story of Jesus, but it's better news, it's the best good news if that story does something in my life. You know what I'm saying? You may know the story of a lot of historical people. You may know their story. You can read about it in history books. You can read online. Maybe you know some stories of people in our lifetime, firsthand account, maybe some stories of people in your family And they changed you, no doubt. A lot of people know the story of Jesus, but I want to tell you something. The story is the best good news because it impacts all of us. It impacts all of us. First of all, as a way of introducing the series, the good news has the power to transform us. It really does. As it brings salvation to us, we are changed. We're transformed. Now, you might have given up hope on people in your life that have rebelled, or people who have gone down a wrong path, people who have followed the ways of Satan or the ways of sin or the ways of their own flesh. You might know people that, that maybe used to be walking good, or maybe they never were walking good, and they're going down a path. I see on my own Twitter feed every now and then, please pray for my son, or please pray for my wife or my husband, or pray for my parents. They're lost spiritually. They don't know Jesus. And there are people who have given up hope on other people in their life because they're too far gone, if you will. But Jesus never is anyone too far gone for him. Never is anyone too far down in the pit of despair and sin for Jesus. Sin is a deep pit. I mean, it's deep and ugly, and it's messy and murky and muddy. And you might remember the story of the prodigal son in the Bible, where he finally came to his senses. And maybe you know some people that need to come to their senses. I want to tell you something. Don't give up on them, because the gospel, the story about Jesus, this life-changing story, has the power to transform us. It can transform the worst of the worst. The Apostle Paul said he was the chief of sinners. I mean, he was killing people who talked about Jesus. He said, I'm the worst of the worst. I was stopping them. Don't give up on anybody. The power of the gospel, the power of the good news can transform us. So you might say, well, what can I do? Here's what you can do. You can pray for them to hear this story, the story about Jesus. You might think, oh, it's not that important. How can this story? Don't underestimate the power of the gospel and the Holy Spirit working with that gospel, that word, that good news about Jesus. All right? So this is the first introductory remark. It has the power to transform us. Now, today's Valentine's Day, and I don't usually make things fit so perfectly on a holiday like Mother's Day or 4th of July or things like that, but today it fits so well. It fits so well because we're going to talk about the good news, how it transforms us, and what does it look like. And we can define it in a single word. Did you know that? And this word is one word. And I didn't notice this first service, but I noticed the young lady who was singing right here had it on her shirt. Did you see that? Arian, she's my niece. She had this word on her shirt. I said, oh, that's the message today. When I was a kid in church camp and in Sunday school, we used to sing a little chorus. It went like this. Love, 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 love. The gospel in a word is love. You remember that one? Love your neighbor as your brother. Love, love, love. And it just kind of repeated itself. But that's the gospel in one word. And that's my second introductory point. The good news can be summed up in one word. Now here's the verse before we see that. It comes from John 13. John 13, Jesus said, a new command I give you. A new command. Now, there was the command of love in the Old Testament. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and self. Love your neighbor with all your heart. Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's in the Old Testament, the Deuteronomy passage we call the Shema. What's Jesus talking about here? A new command. A new command I give you. Love one another as I have loved you. He showed them a whole new way, a whole new level of love. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. So the good news can be summed up in this one word, the word L-O-V-E. That's what it is. That's the gospel. That's the essence of the gospel, the good news. Now, the good news is a great story. It's an incredible story, the greatest story ever told. But if it's never touched your life, if it hasn't transformed you, then that's all it is. It's just a good story. Still the gospel, but the gospel happened so it could transform us. And so some people say, well, I don't believe that story. I would rather believe this story. You know, last night I was watching the end of the movie, I think it was called The Book of Eli. You remember this movie? The Book of Eli. Denzel Washington, is he the one in that? Yeah. And he had this book memorized. Well, it was the Bible he had memorized, and it was a post-apocalyptic world where nobody could read anymore, and the world was all in shambles. It had been just destroyed, and he had this Bible memorized in his heart. And I never noticed this on this movie, but I noticed it last night when he recited the whole Bible from memory, the King James Version. That's a miraculous feat in and of itself. But when they placed this book on the shelf in this place on the island out in San Francisco Bay, what's that island called? Yeah, Alcatraz Island. That's where everybody's society's starting over. They placed this Bible. I'd never noticed this before. Never noticed it before, but they put the Bible, this big Bible, King James Version, on the shelf, and I never noticed it, but to the left of the Bible was the Quran. Maybe the Quran was to the right of the Bible, and to the left of the Bible was another holy book from another religion. It was like the movie was trying to say, all these are equal. I want to tell you something. If you thought they were all equal, you might be in the wrong place. You might be in the wrong place. Because there's only one book and one story and one gospel. And that story culminates in the story, in the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Young people, I want to tell you something. You're going to be tempted to accept all religions as equal. People are going to put pressure on you to say, no, if that's what's right for them, it's okay. But let me tell you something, it's not okay. And in this place, it's not okay. We believe in one Lord, and his name is Jesus. And his story is in the Bible. Now, not necessarily only in the King James Version, but it's in what we call the Bible. So, if that hasn't transformed you, it might be because you haven't really believed it, or you haven't really heard it. Because my last introductory statement is, the good news says that how you live is what you believe. Let that sink in for a little bit. How you live is what you believe. You might say, I believe this, but this is not what you live. So we're gonna hone in on this word, love, and how it is the essence of the gospel. Now, a lot of times in the Bible, we read passages, and we're going to read some here in a minute, that say, love one another, love the family of God, love each other. And you could argue, you could say, well, look right there, it says we should love one another. And so I'm going to love my family. I'm going to love the folks I go to church with. I'm going to love the people that I like. But I want to show you what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5. In Matthew chapter 5, this is so powerful. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Some rabbis interpreted the Old Testament to say, hate your enemy. If they're not Jewish, get them out. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Now look at this last verse here, verse 46. This is so powerful. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? You hear what he's saying here? He's saying, look, if you only love the people that you agree with, if you only love the people you like, if you only love the people who are like you, who voted like you, who believe like you, if you only love those people, what's that? That's easy. Anybody can do that. But if you love the people you don't like. If you love the people on the other side of the aisle, I'm not talking about these aisles. You know what I'm talking about. If you only love the people who think like you, what is that? That's not really love. No, love has some test to it. And so, real living under the power of the gospel is not only about recognizing this incredible, life-changing, unconditional love of God for us, but it is also about how we live in it and are transformed by it. It changes our attitude and it changes our behavior. And that's what I want to talk about, this word love. In 1 Timothy 1:5, this is not on the screen, Paul said that the goal of his instruction is love. In other words, everything I'm teaching, the reason I'm doing this is to produce love. That's why I'm doing this. He told the Colossians in Colossians 2:2 that his hope for them was that they would be encouraged in heart and united in love. Paul said in Romans 13, verse 8, he said, "Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves has fulfilled the law." The Apostle Peter picked this same topic up, the topic of love, as the essence of the gospel, when he said, "Now that you've purified yourselves by obeying the truth of the gospel, so that you have sincere love for each other, love one another deeply from the heart." That's what I told my wife's father before we married. I love her deeply from the heart. John picked this up too. You know, John is really the beloved apostle, and he wrote a lot about love in his gospel and in his books, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. We don't have time to read all those passages, but in chapter 3, verse 11 of 1 John, he said, "For this is the message you've heard from the beginning." The beginning of what? The beginning of Jesus' ministry with us. The beginning of when he called us. We should love one another. Love one another. Needless to say, the Bible, the entire Bible, especially the New Testament and the Gospels, have a lot to say about love. If you see gospel, you can put the word love in there, and it will work in most cases. It will work. Some people say the whole Bible is just a love letter from God. Just a love letter from God. Now, I want to share the rest of my time, just for a few minutes, from what we call the love chapter. How many of you know what the love chapter is in the Bible? Anybody know? Shout it out. 1 Corinthians 13 is the love chapter. Now, this is kind of interesting if you're a student of the Bible, because the book of 1 Corinthians is a book to a troubled church. I mean, they got lots of issues. I mean, you just read through this book. At the very beginning of the book, they're divided according to who baptized them. The Apostle Paul recognized this. He said, some of you are saying, I was baptized by Paul. Some of you saying, I was baptized by Apollos. And you kind of think that you're better than somebody else because of who baptized you. He said, that has nothing to do with it. He goes on and he talks about a man who was having sexual relations with his stepmother. He says, and you people are okay with this. In the next chapter, he's talking about Christians who are going to lawsuits with one another. He says, and you're suing one another. If we can't get along in the church, how are people out there supposed to get along with us? And so chapter after chapter after chapter, he talks about problems they're having. He said, some of you have the gift of speaking in tongues, or you have this gift of knowledge, or, this was the first century. He says, and you're flaunting this. You're standing up and like, look at me, I've got the better gift. I'm more spiritual than you are. And so it was a troubled church. And so it's ironic that we find in this troubled church letter the love chapter. Or is it? It's not really. It might seem that way at first, but what Paul is saying is, look, you got so many issues, so many problems, so many causes and sources of division and fighting. And then he says, I'm going to show you, this is the last verse of chapter 12, not on the screen, but the last verse of chapter 12 says, this is 12:31, 1 Corinthians 12:31, you can look it up. I'm going to show you a more excellent way. That's what he says, a more excellent way. So I want to break this chapter down into 3 sections. And I want you to know some things about the gospel, about the good news, really about love. First of all, I want you to know that love, we learn from the first chapter, is not optional. It's essential. Love is essential. Listen as I read from the New International Version of the Bible. The Apostle Paul says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast but do not have love, I gain nothing. Did you hear that? The word nothing is in there a few times. You can have an IQ of 140. You can aptly defend your political views and all your understanding of the world. But if you don't have love, you know what it amounts to? A big fat 0. That's what it is. Even if people curse you, if they're angry at you, and we see a lot of that today with disagreements, don't we? Social media is such a revolutionary way to communicate and talk and get your views out, but it is so mean and nasty sometimes, isn't it? Am I the only one that has that kind of Twitter feed? Maybe I need to get your followers. Maybe I need to follow the people you're following if you're not seeing this. Maybe I'm following the wrong people. But even I see Christians, so-called Christians, fighting and biting one another. And it is good to have good theology and good beliefs and a good lifestyle. But if you don't have love, it's nothing. We still are called to speak the truth in love. Rick Warren sums up the first 3 verses like this. He said, God is saying, I can have the eloquence of an orator, I can have the knowledge of a genius, I can have the faith of a miracle worker, I can have the generosity of a philanthropist, and I can have the dedication of a martyr. But if I don't have love, none of it counts. None of it counts. Did you get that? We can be the best of the best at doing the best. But if we don't have love, if we don't express love, then it doesn't count. It's a 0. Now, I don't often do this, but I love the Message version of the Bible in some cases. The Message version of the Bible was translated by Eugene Peterson and put into our vernacular. I mean, it was an attempt to make the Bible sound like the way we talk. And sometimes it gets it and sometimes it doesn't do it, but I think in this chapter it got it. I'm going to read this passage in the next section from the Message version. Here's what it says. This is the same version, same passage, 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 3, but this is the Message version. You should read it sometime. If I speak with human eloquence and angelic ecstasy, but don't love, notice he didn't say don't have love. He said don't love. I'm nothing but the creaking of a rusty gate. How annoying is that? If I speak God's word with power, revealing all his mysteries and making everything plain as day, and if I have faith that says to a mountain, jump, and it jumps, but I don't love, I'm nothing. If I give everything I own to the poor and even go to the stake to be burned as a martyr, but don't love, I've gotten nowhere. So no matter what I say, what I believe, and what I do, I'm bankrupt without love. I think that pretty much puts it in our vernacular, doesn't it? Bankrupt without love. What a powerful statement. All the knowledge and the money and the power and the influence in the world does us no good if we don't have love, if we don't love. So love is not optional, not for Christ followers, not for us. It's essential. Maybe you're thinking, wait a minute, preacher. I can't force love. Oh, really? I can't make myself love someone. I mean, I don't even want to be in the same room with that person. Well, that's where the second point comes in. The middle section of the chapter tells us this, that love is not primarily emotional, but it's intentional. It's intentional. You know, we've been programmed over the years and in our lives that love is a feeling. You know, some of us grew up on the great songs. I don't know, I didn't grow up on Elvis, but I like Elvis now more than I used to. I even have Elvis on one of my favorite satellite radio stations. And there's nobody better that sings, "I Can't Help Falling in Love with You." I mean, even now, as I think about it, I want to sing it in his voice, but I won't do that for you. And because this will be on the internet forever. The Righteous Brothers, "I've Lost That Love and Feeling." Remember that song? Now, my wife remembers that song most from the movie Tom Cruise was in. Top Gun. Yeah. And Justin Timberlake's "Can't Stop the Feeling." You know, Valentine's Day is today, but a true lover puts a lot of thought into loving the people in his or her life. Love's not an emotion. Where do we get that idea? That love, I had to feel it before I could do it. Where do we get that idea? Let's read the passage and talk about it. This is the NIV, verses 4 through 7. Love is patient, love is kind. Oftentimes we read this at weddings, don't we? It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. I want to tell you, there's not a whole lot of feeling in that right there. Obviously, agape love is not something that we feel. It's something that we do. Now, you may or may not be able to control your feelings, but you can control your actions. I know some of you are into country music, and I want to recite some lyrics. I want to recite some lyrics for you, and I want to see who can name the country music star who made these possible. Now, I was amazed. Last service, not one person got this right. Even my cowboy boot-wearing niece, who was here last service, not the one who sang here, her sister, did not get this. So let's see if you can get it. Now, don't shout it out before I finish. If you shout it out before I finish, you have to stand up and sing the rest of it, all right? If you shout it out after I'm done, then you're okay. I'm looking for the singer, but I want you to listen to these words. This is a country song, but it really captures what I'm saying here today from the gospel. I remember well the day we wed. I can see that picture in my head. I still believe the words we said, forever will ring true. Love is certain, love is kind, love is yours, and love is mine. But it isn't something that we find, it's something that we do. It's holding tight, letting go, it's flying high and laying low. Let your strongest feelings show, and your weakness too. It's a little and a lot to ask, an endless and a welcome task. Love isn't something that we have, it's something that we do. And the last few lines are, there's no request, too big or small. We give ourselves, we give our all. Love isn't some place that we fall. It's something that we do. Who's got it? Who knows it? Don't shout it out. Don't shout it out. All right, I see two hands here. Two hands? Two hands. Dave, I saw yours first. Who was it? Okay, I don't know Lisa Hartman's song, but that's a Clint Black song. Oh, his wife. Okay, yeah. Clint Black, is that who you had? Wow, what a great song, huh? Love isn't something that we find or fall into. Love is something that we do. Emotions fluctuate and fade and fail, but our actions can keep going. Again, listen to this from the Message version. This is so good. Don't miss this, all right? This part of the chapter in the Message is better than the last part. Listen to this. Eugene Peterson translates the Bible here in the Message, 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. Love never gives up. Love cares more for others than for self. Love, listen to this, leave this up here for a minute. Love doesn't want what it doesn't have. Think about that. That's powerful, isn't it? Think about that in your marriage. Think about that in your life. Love doesn't want what it doesn't have. Listen to this. Love doesn't strut. It doesn't have a swelled head. Doesn't force itself on others. Isn't always me first. Doesn't fly off the handle. Doesn't keep score of the sins of others. Doesn't revel when others grovel. Takes pleasure in the flowering of truth. Puts up with anything. Trusts God always. Always looks for the best. Never looks back, but keeps going and going to the end. Isn't that good? I love that. Love is not a feeling. Now, love produces a feeling, and when you get that feeling, dance with it, huh? Go with it. That's awesome. And probably leading up to your wedding day and on your wedding day, you had that feeling, and maybe many times afterwards, you had that feeling. But there are going to be days when you don't have that feeling. Love's not producing that feeling. What is love doing? Love is producing an action. Love is producing a behavior. Love is saying, do this, whether you feel like it or not. That's good counseling right there. Do it, whether you feel like it or not. Even though Romans 12:9 says, hate what is evil and cling to what is good, love still chooses to do the right thing regardless of the feelings. I love that line that says, love isn't always me first. Me first. No. Unselfish, that's what love is. This is the gospel. This is the good news. This is how it transforms our lives. The last paragraph, the final part of this love chapter, makes it clear to us that love is not temporal, but it's eternal. In other words, if you want to know, Steve talked a little bit this morning, I think both services he did this, about heaven. Heaven being heaven with only with Jesus as the center of it. Let me tell you about heaven for eternity. Let me throw a big word at you, a Latin phrase that you probably know. The modus operandi. Do you know this word? Do you know this phrase? In other words, the way it operates in heaven is love. It's love. And when you get to heaven, you might see people you never thought would be there. You don't even think should be there. How did you get here? I know how you voted. How did you get here? I've seen your posts on Twitter or Facebook. What are you doing here? I mean, it might blow your mind when you see who's there. But hopefully, right at the entrance of the gate, right at that gate, the entrance of heaven, hopefully there's a big mirror you can look in and say, wow, that guy made it? Looking at yourself. Because that might be the biggest surprise of all. If you haven't loved like you should. Thank God for God's grace, huh? Love is eternal. This is the way it's going to operate. Here's what the Bible says. Where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. See, Paul's still talking about all their boasting and stuff. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. You know, children can be very immature and selfish. I reasoned like a child. You know, me, I got to win. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. Listen to me, folks. I don't know what got you upset last week. I don't know what you got mad about this morning. I don't know what's getting into your crawl. I don't know how you're social media reactions are going. But whatever it was, it's probably not worth it. Getting all bent out of shape. You know what I'm saying? That's what Paul's saying here. Prophecies will cease, political leaders, political kingdoms, ideas, a lot of these things are going to be gone forever. They're going into the dustbin of history. And yet that's what's getting you mad. That's what's angering you. That's what's upsetting you. What has that got to do with the fact that Jesus died for you? He gave his life for you. And your life in return should be a life of love for others he gave his life for. The last time I looked in my theology, Jesus died for the world. Therefore, I need to love everybody. Now, this kind of lets you off the hook. I didn't say you had to feel like it. Remember the last point? I didn't say it has to feel good. You don't have to dig down deep and say, well, preacher said if I don't feel like loving. No, I didn't say that. I said you got to act like it. Because this is the language of eternity. This is heaven. And the greatest verse, maybe the most popular verse, I want you to read it out loud with me, is the last verse of chapter 13. Read this out loud with me. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest is love. Alan Jackson. No, God. The Apostle Paul. Oh, that's good. Yeah, this is where country music got to get its lyrics from the Bible, and we could love country music again, right? All of it. Dr. E.V. Hill was an African-American preacher from earlier in the 1900s, and he told a story about what happened to him in his life. You know, he was in a very turbulent time, like these times. He lived during what's called the Watts riots, and he was a straight talking preacher, and he talked straight to both sides of the issue. And you know, when you talk truth to one side, you'll get hate from that side and love from the other side. But if you talk truth and you talk hard to both sides, imagine the hate you're going to get from both sides. Nobody's going to like you. But he just talked the truth. He spoke the truth. And one day he learned a very credible report that anarchists were going to put a bomb in his car, and for him to be very careful, very careful. So he didn't go anywhere all that day, and that night he and his wife lay worried and praying and thinking, what are we going to do? And the next morning he woke up and his wife wasn't beside him. And he said to himself, where is she? Maybe down in the kitchen. He went downstairs and she wasn't downstairs, and he noticed his car was gone, and his heart just sank. And he stood at the door there looking at the driveway, and finally the car pulled back in and his wife was driving. And as soon as she got out, he was out on the sidewalk and he said, woman, what are you doing? And she said, honey, she said, this community needs you a lot more than it needs me. And if there was going to be a bomb in your car today, it was going to get me and not you. And E.V. Hill said, I always knew what love was, but I really didn't know until that day. I knew my wife loved me, but I didn't really experience it until that day. And that's love, isn't it? Now I'm going to refrain from asking how many of you wives would do that for your husbands. But hey, think about it, all right? Think about it. I mean, you could start the car at least with the frost, get it worked off. Okay, just let him do that. This is the gospel. This is the good news in a word. It's the word love. And it's not optional. It is essential. It's not emotional. It's intentional. It's not temporary. It's not going away. It's eternal. And if you and I are going to be believers of Jesus, if we're going to be followers of Christ today in this world, we better grow up and act like it. And this love is acting like it. This is how it transforms us. This is the good news for your life. Let's stand up and pray. Almighty God, thank you so much for the gospel. Thank you for the good news. Thank you for love. I pray that we could not only witness your example and see what you did in history, but God, we can experience it in our own lives, in our own marriage, in our own family, in our own community, and even throughout the world. I thank you, God, for how this makes a difference in our lives. God, will you bless us to that end today? Will you just give us your blessing as we worship and praise you? That's our prayer in Jesus' name.